The Economic Times, 13th of February 2024, due to its growing frontiers, China pushes the boundaries. China has been lying, attacking all of her neighbors, and stealing land on a large scale from all of them, no matter how big or tiny. Beijing, aggression or hegemony is not in the blood of the Chinese nation, Chairman Xi Jinping reportedly said to President Joe Biden in late 2021. China has never initiated a war or other conflict since the People's Republic was founded, and it has also never stolen a single inch of territory from another nation. However, this assertion is untrue, given China's heedless encroachment on land and marine borders. Along their shared rocky, mountainous border, including Bhutan and India, China is advancing wherever it can to establish a fait accompli on the ground. It aims to do the same thing in Japan's Senkaku Islands as it does with illegal territorial claims in the South China Sea. The new infrastructure along the Indian border is being evaluated by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in the United States. It stated that China is currently undertaking a major expansion of its infrastructure that is enhancing its ability to project military power along its western frontier in Xinjiang as well as Tibet. According to the Xi's assessment, China is building or renovating dozens of airports and heliports. These infrastructure projects, along with new rail, roads, and other facilities, improve PLA logistics by enabling the movement of more troops, weapons, and supplies closer to the frontier. It stated, the pace of development in the region accelerated following standoffs and skirmishes between China and India along disputed portions of their border in 2017 and 2020. The Doklam Plateau, where PLA engineers tried to construct a road, is the subject of the 2017 illusion. The violent outburst in 2020 in eastern Ladak's Galwan Valley was much more horrific. Airports and heliports are significant in Tibet and Xinjiang's harsh and relentless high-altitude regions. In addition to acting as launch pads for assets used in surveillance and maybe strike operations, they are essential for transferring people and equipment into the area. Xi's assessment states, China's western frontier is seeing a sweeping build-up in air power. China Power has identified 37 airports and heliports in Tibet and Xinjiang that have been built or renovated during 2017 based on an assessment of satellite images and other open-source sources. At least 22 can be recognized as military or dual-use facilities when finished. In 2020, this activity picked up a lot more speed. China started building 7 new air facilities and upgrading 7 others in the year alone. Tibet is where most of the building is taking place. Since 2017, all 5 dual-use airports have been upgraded with new runways, hangars, aprons, and terminals. 4 additional airports have been built less than 60 kilometers from the Indian border. For instance, the PLA's coverage is significantly supplemented by the airports at Lhonsi, Angari Brang, and Shigatse Tingri. The closest airport to Doklam is the dual-use Shigatse Peace Airport, upgraded with a sizable subterranean structure with 3 or more entrances. According to Xi's, the PLA is also significantly expanding its capacity to carry out helicopter-based operations by building at least 5 new heliports in Tibet and modernizing 2 existing heliports. These heliports, run by the PLA Army Aviation Units, are dispersed throughout Tibet, from Ningxi City in the east to Rutag County in the west. Since helicopters can maneuver in ways that airplanes and ground equipment cannot, installing these heliports is expected to improve significantly PLA operations in the hilly area. Since 2017, Xinjiang has seen the renovation of at least 15 airports, 7 of which are military or dual-use. Hotan, which lies 240 kilometers from the Indian border, is one instance. It features an extended air defense complex, more tarmacked areas, and a new runway. Since 2019, 3 new airports in Xinjiang have begun to be built, the most recent being Tashqorgan, located close to the border crossing with Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. However, Xi's clarified, the PLA has several significant disadvantages compared to India, even with the military advantages China's investments in the region have brought. A large chunk of China's border lies on the highest reaches of the Tibetan Plateau, which is frequently referred to as the roof of the world due to its significant elevation. 20 airports and heliports in Tibet and Xinjiang, China, are situated at elevations exceeding 3,000 meters above sea level. The PLA faces enormous operational obstacles at such altitudes. Thin air impairs an aircraft's ability to take off, necessitating longer runways and possibly limiting the amount of fuel, cargo, or weapons it can carry. Bad and chilly weather presents additional difficulties. According to official Chinese statistics, The length of Tibet's highway network increased by 51% between 2015 and 2021, reaching 11,820 kilometers. Xinjiang's roadway network expanded from 17,830 kilometers to 20,920 kilometers. These highways promote economic development and help the PLA transport supplies. For example, work is underway on at least 8 roads running from the G219 highway to the Indian border. They might be used, for example, by the PLA to rapidly realign soldiers in the event of another conflict in the Galwan Valley. Another new route will be finished in 2021 and cut the trip time by 8 hours, linking Ningxi with Medog County in eastern Tibet. The 52nd and 53rd Combined Light Infantry Brigades headquarters are located in Ningxi, demonstrating the importance of these new routes in extending the PLA's presence. The rail network in Xinjiang has also expanded rapidly, reaching 7,800 kilometers in 2020 from 5,900 kilometers in 2015. New routes connect airports and military bases. But with only 800 kilometers of track, the geography of Tibet makes it extremely difficult to build additional railways. In 2021, the first high-speed railway was completed, running from Lhasa to Ningxi. Shortly after its opening, the railway transported PLA personnel to a training center. China's salami slicing strategies, which have been applied so well in the South China Sea, indicate how China behaves along its borders. Bhutan is one victim of Beijing's long-standing use of such techniques against it. China then tries to use negotiations to legitimize its land grab, but this kind of coercion has badly harmed bilateral talks. China claims 495 square kilometers of the Bail Khenpajong, a sacred Buddhist place in the north, 269 square kilometers of Bhutanese territory in the west, and 650 square kilometers of the Sokdang Wildlife Sanctuary in the east. China has crossed the border into Bhutan and built up quickly, establishing towns like Gyalapug Village. In an article for the American think tank Jamestown Foundation, Sudha Ramachandran stated, Beijing seems to be significantly changing the situation on the ground along the border with Bhutan. The PRC is building townships along a river valley in Bail Khenpajong, located in territory it claims in north-central Bhutan, at an astounding rate, as seen by recent satellite pictures. The settlement has about 200 buildings, including roadways, hydroelectric plants, communication hubs, and security and military outposts constructed throughout the previous 10 years. China has encountered minimal resistance from Bhutan, which is made worse by the challenge of reaching the region from the Bhutanese end. Both nations were to refrain from taking any unilateral action to change the status quo of the boundary, according to a 1998 agreement, but the Chinese language is as cheap as the paper it is written on. The triangular border at Doklam is especially intriguing to the PLA since controlling it would strengthen China's military stance against India. The rationale behind Beijing's land grab is not entirely clear, stated Ramachandran. Under the circumstances of an India-China war, sovereignty over Bail Khenpajong would be of no strategic importance, in contrast to Doklam, which is close to India and where the PRC has also moved forward to change the situation on the ground by building roads and bunkers. Nevertheless, China is eager to strengthen its economic and other influence in Bhutan, concurrently altering the status quo in its favor through its infrastructure building operation. This would strengthen the PRC's position and assist it in establishing a favorable environment. State media and official outlets are disseminating increasingly absurd notions regarding China's outlandish claims to maritime territory and its coercive tactics at sea. The China Coast Guard, CCG, has, for instance, expelled Japanese vessels from the Diaoyu/Senkaku Islands, which are an intrinsic part of China's territory, according to a tweet posted by the tabloid Global Times on January 27. CCG vessels also enforce the law and protect maritime rights in China's territorial waters. We implore the Japanese side to promptly end illicit activity in this region and ensure such situations don't happen again. These claims are the product of China's imagination. Beijing has also been successful in inflaming tensions with the Philippines, which has led Manila to become increasingly adamant in denouncing apparent Chinese meddling. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin cautioned the Philippines to tread carefully and don't play with fire after Manila declared it would renovate military facilities in its northernmost province of Batanes. China was then sharply cautioned in a press release from the Philippine Department of National Defense on February 10. The Defense Department emphasizes that Batanes is Philippine territory, and China has no business warning the Philippines about what it does within its territory. China's low credibility among Filipinos is mainly caused by its actions and pronouncements. If China is serious about gaining the respect and trust it has been attempting to acquire but has been unable to thus far, it should abstain from inflammatory speech and actions. Growing hostility from nations like the Philippines and Japan has been brought on by Chinese encroachment. In mid-2020, China's 2020 gambit against India and Eastern Ladakh also incited anger in India. China has declined to reinstate Ladakh's April 2020 status quo after multiple discussions and army withdrawals from sensitive areas. This is precisely how Chinese salami slicing works. The PLA carved out significant buffer zones, mostly from Indian territory, forcing Delhi to relinquish sovereignty over previously patrolled areas. Once the PLA establishes a footing, it is hard to remove. Following the conflict in eastern Ladakh, China and India made a concerted effort to fortify their respective infrastructures. It is estimated that both nations maintain 50,000 troops in Ladakh. China started building a new road and 300-meter bridge over the strategically significant Pangong Lake in October 2021 to enable soldiers to move fast to both sides of the lake and regions close to the line of actual control, LAC. In 2022, work on a more significant, broader bridge permitting armored vehicles to cross began. Bridges are weak points in a war, but in less dramatic situations, they are crucial to PLA logistics. Just 6 kilometers from the LAC, to the west of these bridges, the PLA erected what appears to be a permanent divisional-level headquarters and garrison. Midway through 2020, the camp became a permanent residence, and it grew during 2021. In addition to armored vehicles and revetments, some shelters are likely used for anti-aircraft and artillery systems. It serves as a connection that links the Western Theater Command headquarters and the troops at Pangong. A second radome was built on a mountaintop north of the lake, roughly 6 kilometers from the headquarters complex, following the start of construction in August 2021. Such building initiatives demonstrate China's resolve to stay put and expand its influence. While the Chinese and Indian militaries have since withdrawn forces from the most contentious standoff sites where the 2020 build-up occurred and established temporary buffer zones, both sides retain high numbers of troops forward deployed along the disputed frontier, and there are several flashpoints that could erupt into another border crisis at any time, reads the conclusion of a report released last year by the Indo-Pacific Security Program of the Center for a New American Security. With forward deployments, increased mistrust, and both China and India upgrading infrastructure and deploying cutting-edge weaponry on their sides of the disputed border, the likelihood of protracted standoffs that could turn into localized or even major hostilities is still very high. The same is true everywhere China openly advances through covert or forced means. If victims don't aggressively defend themselves, China will simply be more confident to carry out these unlawful actions to expand its borders. To some extent, Xi was correct when he said that China has never taken 1 inch of land from other countries. Instead, it has contributed hundreds of square kilometers.